Bob Eckert was the CEO of Mattel when he received the call from the Consumer Product Safety Commission that no executive wants to hear. He was going to be part of the largest recall in history. Over 18 million toys were going to be recalled, 30% of which were already on store shelves. So children's safety across the world, not just in the United States, was at risk. Mattel's stock dropped 20% in the first day. Consumer confidence went to an all-time low for their leading product sets, Fisher-Price, Sesame Street. But in 2 weeks, the stock price was back to where it was pre-recall levels. And consumer confidence was back to almost where it was. By the end of the year, Mattel had made more money in the toy industry than any other company ever had. How did this happen? It's because Bob Eckert had set his company and his team up to be resilient and anti-fragile. I had the opportunity to interview Bob Eckert and ask him, how could your company and you be so resilient when this terrible recall happened to you? He said there were a number of things that he did. First of all, he always ended every staff meeting with a what if question. And that is, what if we had a truckers' strike and we couldn't get our product out? What if we had a safety issue? What if our IT system was hacked? What if all of a sudden there was a natural disaster that destroyed one of our warehouses or more than one of our warehouses? And he would ask these questions not of the experts, but of people who was not their domain of knowledge. In other words, he wouldn't ask the IT person, what if we were hacked? He'd ask someone in finance. The idea was he was trying to instill in everyone's mind the contingency planning and the resilient attitude that they would have, that they could, if not control, at least influence what was happening to them. His executives took this idea and pushed it on down, and they did the same what if questions to their staff. So he built an executive team that was resilient and ready for things to go wrong because they had pre-thought about it, not just intellectually but also emotionally, that they could handle things. The second thing that he said he did was he kept a list of what people were good at by their skill and where they should play in times of stress and crisis. It wasn't by job, it was by person and skill. In other words, who would you want to put in front of CNN who's asking really tough questions about children's safety? Or who would you want to put on an airplane to go to your subcontractors in China to figure out, how did this happen anyway? Who's good at problem solving and root cause analysis? Those kinds of skills. They're very different. And so he had this list, and it wasn't by job type. You don't necessarily put the HR person out there to handle CNN, when in fact you may have someone who has really good communications skills, but they're in research. So he had this list. And the other thing he did with the list was he pre-assigned people. He said, if we're ever in stress and crisis, this is what I'm going to expect from you. You're going to be really good at problem solving, and I'm going to send you on the toughest problem. Or you can handle the media really well, so I'm going to put you out in front. Another thing he did was he had decided early on that he was going to communicate as much as he could and as honestly and with as much integrity as possible. He was being warned by those organizations who should have been warning him, such as HR and legal, to not say too much because we don't want to say something that could be misconstrued. He ignored that advice and in fact went out and hit the media very quickly. In the first 12 hours, he conducted 13 interviews on major television shows like Good Morning America and the Today Show himself. His team, his executive team of direct reports, did over 400 interviews in the first 24 hours. These were not scripted. These people were just put out there and said, tell the truth as much as you know. So he was able to communicate with some degree of candor and integrity very quickly that turned things around. The last thing he mentioned was, and these are my words, not his, but he decided to seek advantage in a time of adversity. In other words, he saw this as a time to show people that Mattel stood for certain levels of safety and integrity and not let the disaster of the recalls take them down, but instead push them up. So he thought this is a time like it was for J&J with the Tylenol crisis. This is when you can establish your credibility with your consumers. This video on team resilience is one of a 3-part series looking at individual leaders, organizations, and teams. You may want to check out the other 2 videos.